Slowly learning that fact, and we're very, very pissed off.
This is Lord Frost. He's a politician and he thinks Wales and Scotland are nations. The UK should become a unitary state, with devolution being evolved backwards, and independence should be made impossible. Imagine the Brexiteer reaction if the EU had said half this stuff. And now you might understand why Scots are
Very pissed off.
Frost is an idiot. Why could I say that? Well, he was the man in charge of negotiating for the Northern Ireland Protocol. That was meant to be a deal to resolve the issues of a land border on the island of Ireland between the UK and the EU. Within only a few years, he started slagging off his own deal.
The protocol is not working. It's completely lost consent in one community in Northern Ireland. It's not doing the thing it was set up to do, protect the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. In fact, doing the opposite. It has to change. I do understand why the EU finds it difficult to come back to an agreement that was reached only 2 years ago.
Every time you hear something that angers you from Frost, hit that like button or put in a comment. It will share the video and it'll make it spread around YouTube. Best part being, it's all for free. Frost is a failed politician with no democratic authority because he is a lord. I didn't vote for him, you didn't vote for him, no one voted him into power, and yet he has the ability to destroy countries in the Union. This level of stupidity was exemplified with his article in the Daily Telegraph. Lord Frost had been attacking Scotland and Wales in an attempt to bring them closer to England, stating those in favour of union needed to start fighting back. Frost wants to start his fight by changing the rules of how you hold a referendum, rules that would have stopped Brexit. There needs to be clarity on the terms of a referendum, clarity which reflects the reality that it is wholly exceptional for states to allow their own dissolution. Of course, any government would have to respect the settled will of an overwhelming majority in Scotland to govern themselves. Those terms have to be defined. The UK is everyone's country. We must protect and support that. I would suggest 75% of seats in the Scottish Parliament in favour of independence over a 10-year period, legally binding. Without that, a referendum should simply be impossible. If that had happened during the Brexit referendum, people would have gone absolutely bananas at the EU. But it's alright for an unelected person to dictate that in a newspaper and encourage others to think that. Brexit would never have happened under these rules and would fall apart if implemented now. Countries such as Northern Ireland, Scotland and Gibraltar voted against Brexit, but they have now been ignored for 6 years. Frost's solution is to simply change the language, which will allow nationalism to disappear. I mean, you can't... It almost sounds like he's attempting some form of brainwashing, or one of those things of just ignore the problem, don't talk about it, no one's allowed to talk about it, it'll go away. He goes on to say, the new government can start by changing its language. Somehow, we've all drifted into speaking as if this country were already a confederation made up of 4 nations that have chosen to work together, but could equally choose differently. When we think like that, we end up having to constantly justify the existence of our country on a purely transactional basis. Interesting that he brings up the 4 nations, and we'll go into more detail about that later. He then goes on to state, but the UK is a unitary state, not a federation or confederation. Both the 1707 and 1801 Acts of the Union fuse the participants into one state, in which we are all equal. First Great Britain, then the United Kingdom. And I find it interesting that he cites the 1707 Union, because when that was signed, there was civil unrest, burning of the papers, and troops had to be sent in, including to set martial law. Bribery played a role. 20,000 was given to the Earl of Glasgow. Historians Christopher Whatley and Professor Devine agree that money was paid with promises of favours, pensions, offices, and straightforward cash bribes, and it became indispensable to secure government majorities. The Convention of Royal Boroughs, an assembly of representatives of trading towns, claimed, we're not against an honourable and safe union with England, but the condition of the people of Scotland cannot be improved without the Scots Parliament. Out of the 96 petitions sent to the Westminster Parliament, not one supported the Union. And on the day of the signing, violent demonstrations took place outside Parliament House, and inside there were fears that the building would be invaded by protesters. Threats of widespread civil unrest resulted in Parliament imposing martial law. So when Frost brings up the 1707 and 1801 Acts of the Union, They were all fused into one state in which we're all equal. He ignores many points, to the point of reminding me about Orwell's quote, "All are equal, but some are more equal than others." Frost ignores that Scotland had its own legal branch, ignores that London, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own democratically elected bodies. All of this being said by an unelected bureaucrat who has repeatedly failed at every political job he's ever had. Frost added, "Moreover, if you are a citizen of that unitary state, you are British." Funny is I don't remember it being called the Tri-Nations, it's still the Six Nations. I don't remember Wales getting to the semis of the European Cup being called Britain, or England reaching the final as being Britain. But it is the kind of point with Lord Frost. He doesn't think Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland are countries, and he states that in the article. The Scottish Government is not the government of a state in a confederation with England. It is a subordinate entity within the UK, with powers granted to it by the UK Government and Parliament, and ultimately subject to the supremacy of that Parliament. And unfortunately for all of us, this ties into what Frost seems to have as a solution. Hate, not love. And he says this in the article. SNP activists hate it when you remind them of this. All the more need to do so. I urge people in England not to give in to the let them go argument. Not because he loves Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, but because the breakup of the country would be a massive national humiliation. In Europe and beyond, it would be seen as a comeuppance, which they would exploit to the full. But more importantly, because it's morally wrong. Supporters of the Union in Scotland, people who have built their lives and families on the assumption of its permanence, should not be abandoned. The UK is everyone's country and we must protect and support it. But of course, for the same argument for Europeans and Brits who have gone to Europe and Europeans that have come to the UK, he doesn't give a stuff. If this was a divorce, would you be saying to your partner, you need to stay in the relationship because we need to save face with the rest of our neighbourhood? Or, we signed a contract 50 years ago, so we've got to stick with it. Or even better, our great-great-grandparents signed a contract that said we were meant to be together, so we have to stick together. Or, I don't recognise you as a separate entity, so you can't leave me. Is that really the best answer Frost has? The best set of reasons for keeping the union together? That is not how relationships are forged. But let's face it, people like Boris don't have a great track record with relationships.
How come you're prepared to comment on other people's children when you won't talk about your own?
Well, actually, I don't comment on other people's children.
I've got to read it again to you. Are you serious? The children are ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive and illegitimate.
Well,
how many children do you have?
Look, I love my children very much, but they are not standing at this election.
But Tories in general, they just seem to be more interested in numbers than emotions. As a result of this unemotional, detached, out-of-touch response from Frost in the news, there has been one heck of a backlash from Scotland, with SNP spokeswoman Maria Black saying, Lord Frost's comments are a disgrace and fly completely in the face of a long-standing position Unionists have supposedly held that Scotland is an equal partner within the UK, a promise continually made before the 2014 referendum by the anti-independence campaign. Let me know your thoughts on this video. I'm really shocked that Frost has come out and said these comments out in public. This is normally the type of stuff you'd hear whispered around by racists and people who are bigoted. And he's just come out and said it in a national newspaper. I want to say a big thank you to all my YouTube and Patreon supporters. If you'd like to be one, links in the description. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.